I'll share some stuff with you about that when we end this up. But just keep in mind, on Karl Marx setting up the socialistic, communistic mentality. Communism, by definition, I got this from the dictionary, simply means a system of government, and think about our United States now as I read this. A system of government in which the state plans and controls the economy. And a single, often authoritative party holds power, claiming to make progress toward a higher social order in which all goods are equally shared by the people. Now, we don't have time to get into all the ramifications of it, but we've got to understand, if the salt is not going to work in communism, if it's not going to work, light's not going to shine in the communism, then what good is it? I mean, doesn't God's system have enough ability to overthrow these concepts? Folks, you got to understand, there's always been wicked governments. There's always been wicked leaders. That's just the trait of man. Go all the way back to Nimrod in Genesis, from the very first attempt to set up a socialistic mentality, a world dictatorship, all the way to the Antichrist, who will try to succeed during the tribulation. And all in between, we find the same mentality. Except here's the thing that's interesting about this. The Bible tells us there's a way that seems right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. One thing you can't hide in the background is the smelling, rotting corpses of communism, because it has, for its evidence, is mass murders. Socialistic communism has never been established upon faith in God, but rather upon faith in the government. This is why this is going to be important for you to listen to for a second. I'm going to show you how all this ties in with the end time as we wrap this up. Without an oppressive government to regulate everything, brainwash children through public schooling, and heavily taxing its citizens, men naturally tend toward capitalism and freedom. Communism is the end result of an immoral society that abandons God. The reason why we're here right now, folks, is because 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, we were setting ourselves up for this. The only reason why it makes sense to many of our college students and many of our political leaders today is because we didn't get from point A to point F. We went from point A to B to C to D to E to F. And this is where we're at today. Communism is an unjust economic system that rewards the lazy and punishes the diligent. To give jobs and health care and education and other forms of public aid to illegal immigrants is one example of the communist mindset. Illegal immigrants have no rightful claim to the wealth of hard-working American citizens that our socialistic, communistic government steals it from us to give to them. And many of you that are sitting here right now, you're at retirement age and on into retirement, and all those years of hard work, now they're going to start to say, well, you know, you're at a certain age and we don't really think you have much to add to our society. And oh yeah, well, we promised this to you a long time ago, but things change. We're ready for change in our country. Well, consider all the communist nations and how their citizens live. Observe how their leaders always live high on the hog while the average citizen suffers. For example, 1/3 of all Russians today live on less than $30 a month. Now, I want you to think about that. That's $360 a year to survive on. Many of you probably make that much in a week's time. The sad fact of the matter is, this is what Americans are trying to strive for. This is insane. Little by little, as we become socialistic, we are all watching as America's economy is spiraling downward into poverty wages, higher taxes, skyrocketing inflation, and now the threat of government-run health care. Does communism still sound like a great ideal? Either we come back to God and His ways of running a nation, or we are on the road to self-destruction. When you consider, folks, all the countries, for example, this whole thing on the healthcare, and believe me, this is going to be about as political as I'm going to get, so you have to forgive me for being here for a minute, but we've got to step in this area. But when you consider all the other countries that are doing this very same thing and how they are coming to us Americans and trying to get in on our health care because their social government-run system is a complete mess. And yet, that's the way we want to go? I don't know if you understand. I know this cartoon, it's supposed to be funny, but it's not really funny because it's so sad. This happens all the time where socialized government health care is enacted. And when you look at this, you start seeing the reality of where our country is heading, a direction that it's going. Nearly every week, we're becoming more like the United Socialistic States of America. And when you think about this, this is really a very obvious proof that this is setting the stage for an antichrist system to come. Now, this may seem a little far-fetched to some of you, but I want you to hear me something, folks. Isn't it interesting how America doesn't seem to be a real big player in the last days? And most Bible scholars and Bible prophecy teachers tend to lean to the fact that probably the reason why it doesn't show up is because it's insignificant, that it has lost its superpower status. And if it is in existence, it's so non-threatening that when the war goes on between Russia and her allies as they try to move in against Israel, no one comes to Israel's aid. And here we are in a country that is teetering on a real serious dilemma. I want to read to you something that this man made, a statement that he made. Now, keep in mind, this guy ran for president 6 times. The reason why most of us don't know this guy is because he's been dead for quite a long time. But in 1944, he made this amazing statement, and I heard a CD by former President Ronald Reagan as he was quoting this guy. Here's what he says: "The American people will never knowingly adopt socialism. But under the name of liberalism, they will adopt every fragment of the socialist program until one day America will be a socialist nation without knowing how it happened." Now, let me just stop and say, does that do anything to you as a dad or as a parent? I mean, does that hurt you when you think of the potential direction that we're going to go when men like this can say, and we kind of scoff, but today we can see it literally taking place before our very eyes, and you almost feel helpless? Well, I'll tell you what, folks, we're not helpless. We may not control the media as the left-leaning pro-socialist groups are, but folks, God's not dependent on the media. We control something so much more powerful. It's called the gospel. And the gospel has the answer to every single dilemma the world wants to present, whether it's health issues or it's social issue, I don't care what the problem is, the gospel has the answer. Only problem is, I think some of us have failed to let salt manifest in us. We have failed to let light manifest through us. And here's what's happened. I want to give you, for the remaining of my message tonight, a very powerful observation of a book. This book was written 50 years ago. And it was presented before Congress in the House of Representatives on January the 10th, 1963. Now, for those of you that can remember back then,